Let's head back to Garden Grove, California to the John Lazenby Chrysler collection.
A 1960 Chrysler 300F. Lots of questions on this, but the first question, the 300, then the letter designation after it. There were all kinds of different ones. What did those different letters mean?
It was basically the year. The first year was C300, then 56 became the 300B, 57 was the 300C, so on and so forth. So by the time they got to this, which I believe is the 5th year, it was the 300F.
What's the highest letter that they had?
Actually went to a 300L. There was no I, and the story that I've heard, the reason they skipped I is because they figured people would take it as a 1 instead of an I, so they just went right by it.
A lot of different things on the 60, correct? First year the Ram cross induction?
Yeah, a lot of first. Second year of the 413 wedge motor, but the first year of the Ram induction, first year of unibody, first year for the 4 individual bucket seats with a center console, first year for tachometer, first year for electroluminescence. Geez, I guess the list could go on, but it's a styling. It's kind of outlandish as far as the styling.
Like a lot of things were in 1960.
Yeah.
The Cross Ram, as opposed to the previous Hemi, better performance, but not as cool as some of the older ones, or what's your opinion?
Well, when they ended the Hemi in 58 and came out with the 413 wedge in 59, it was okay as far as performance, but it just didn't really have it. And I think by 1960, when they did the Ram induction, they'd actually been working on it since the 50s. It made a big difference in the performance of the car. It acts almost like a supercharger, and if you look at pretty much any new car today, they've got some form of Ram induction on them. It's nothing new.
So is it the answer as simple as it's like supercharging in that you have your carburetor here and all that fuel has to, the distance it has to get into the motor?
Yeah.
Why does that work?
At a certain RPM, it starts forcing it. It rams it in more or less like a supercharger. They also made there were 2 versions of this made. If I can remember the numbers, I believe the runners were 30 inches, and these are isolated all the way down. Thus, they call it a long ram. They made another version that physically looks the same. It's the same length, but the interior of them are only 15 inches on the runners, and that's a short ram, which meant the RPM came up higher. So it was more for a high-end version than this, and they only made a few of those cars in 1960.
Did those engines end up, of course the Hemis were an awful lot of dragsters. Did the Cross Ram motors did they make that step?
No, not really. Not really. What they did by 1962, when Chrysler figured out they'd put their big motors in their small cars like all the manufacturers did, they went to a short ram version, which looks completely different than this. The carburetors are actually situated inboard of the valve covers as opposed to outboard, and once again the short ram, higher RPM, more power at that aspect.
Speaking of completely different, the interior on this has some pretty unusual and fun styling cues to it.
The steering wheel is translucent. The electroluminescence panel lighting, which was really innovative. When you look at this dash, which you think they brought it out in 1960, which means they were working on it in the 50s, it's like a modern dash of today. It was electronically charged. It has a transformer under the dash you don't want to get your finger into, and they actually charged the gauges to illuminate. The swivel seat, which was the first year really kind of, well actually no, 59 was the first year, but it was kind of unique. It was the first year as far as being bucket seats.
That's one of those things that when it was new, I thought, oh, this is the way cars will always be. This makes so much sense, this swivel seat. What do you think?
Well, the reason I think it probably doesn't make sense, when you looked at it from the safety aspect, there's really one bolt that holds it in, and today it wouldn't work. But back then, I don't know that the issues were that prevalent.
And then back seat is also bucket seats.
The back seats, individual buckets. Yeah, it was the first year they did that with the center console and its own individual armrest and storage compartment.
And the big 300 logo there.
Right, the 300 logo.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. One of the most unique things about this car is this sort of kind of Continental kit. Not really. There's no tire under here, and known affectionately by people in the hobby as some of them as the toilet seat.
The toilet seat.
What is all this?
It was a styling exercise that they did. It's the only year they did it on a 300, and it's either people really love it or they really hate it.
It's so unique that I look at it and say, I shouldn't like it because it disturbs the lines of the car a little bit, but it is so cool, and especially with this giant medallion there. This is very cool.